the classic case of people who say, you know what, my kids, they are on Facebook all the time. They're on it for a half hour a day. I want to identify with my kids. I recognize that they told me Facebook is the greatest thing in the world. I'm going to own it, and they're not, you know what, they're kind of like Mark Zuckerberg. They're kind of dreaming in the sense that in the end, this is a stock. I mean, it's not a holy grail. It is not something that people should say, oh, you know what, this is like the Green Bay, I want a piece of the Green Bay Packers. I mean, don't trade as a stock. I don't want a piece of the Green Bay Packers. I want to make money.
Jim, hold on there. We want to go down to Bob Pisani, the New York Stock Exchange. You know, Bob, as we sit here awaiting that first trade, we're all wondering what's taking so long, Bob.
Well, it's pretty obvious. This is an ongoing, dynamic process. It's not a static process. The underwriters are sitting there with their hands and their ears on the phone saying, who wants in? We're getting close. We're closing it out. I've seen this many times with IPOs here on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And I think David is right. I did an informal poll yesterday about traders and where they thought it might open. Most of them were in the 50s. This is a little lower. So there's a lot of people who are saying, hey, I don't want in at 48, 49, 50, 52, but I am interested at 42. They're probably getting more orders in as a result of that 42 level we've been seeing, and they're having to deal with that. They're having to possibly adjust the price at this point. So this is an ongoing process, and it's fascinating to watch it, guys.
It certainly is, Bob Pisani. And Gary, you got to wonder in terms of, we were talking about the retail investor wanting to hold on to this thing for the long term, but the lockup is a major consideration. I mean, as Kramer points out, it's a stock, it is an investment, and the fact of the matter is that the free float is going to increase by about 55% in 91 days, and then it'll double about 151 days from now, according to BTIG.
And that's been known, and that's been known during the roadshow, and it's also been known that venture capitalists who had the opportunity to increase the amount of shares that they were selling on this transaction, Jim's pointed it out many times, they took that opportunity. I mean, I'm just getting emails. We're doing this real time, folks. I mean, you're talking about allocations to retail that are unprecedented. I mean, if you can see this, Melissa, we're not going to say who, but 1 million shares allocated, 7 million as an institutional hold. You're talking about sizable, David, what retail allocation?
What difference does it make that there are so many banks involved in this? Does that add stability moving out? How does that change the dynamic of what now happens?
I think that, Simon, what it did was they can say that their objective was to make wide distribution. Minority firms, for example, I was told that a number of minority firms that some hedge funds had never done business with were offering and allocating shares early this morning.
What about the price action, though, from here?
The price action will not be necessarily influenced by the fact that it had the wide distribution, because ultimately, if you get shares and you want to sell those shares, where you got them from...
Do the banks have an onus to support the stock is what I'm really asking you.
With this size of a deal and this type of liquidity, the answer is no. The answer is simply no. This thing is going to trade on its own supply and demand as soon as it opens. I don't think the banks have any stabilizing role here in any way, shape, or form. David, would you disagree with me? The banks are not going to try to stabilize this or have any influence.
No, I think you're right at this point. It's just too big. And
they did the deal. It's done.
They're done.
And again, as I'm looking at some of the distributions, where people are telling me what they actually got on the deal,
they got hit pretty big. I mean, usually you put in, as we heard, you put in for 20 million, hoping for 20,000.
I'm sort of shocked. And I'm looking at some of these numbers.
Right. The IPO cross is gone, Carl, just so you know, and so we're anticipating that the trade could happen at any moment. So we're just sort of keeping that up there right now. Obviously, it has not unchanged 38. Won't last for long, though, Carl.
And Melissa, I just want to note that NASDAQ, guys, I just want to note, since 11 o'clock, since we've been standing here waiting breathlessly for Facebook to open, NASDAQ dropped rather noticeably, 28.25 to 28.15 here. So I think there is some effect of people anticipating moving money into Facebook and selling a few other shares at least. So we're not quite at the lows of the day on NASDAQ, but it did move down the last 15 minutes.
Right. Carl?
No, I was just going to say, echo Bob's comment on NASDAQ OMX. I mean, it's interesting how 15 minutes can mean so much to perception. A lot of questions this morning on Twitter in the last few minutes about, as you said, Melissa, what is taking so long, and looking at the possibility that perhaps this is not going to go as well organized as we thought. People are very impatient about this, given that the stakes are so high.
Yeah, and the crowds out here in Times Square, Carl, they are growing impatient as well. They continue to gaze up at the tower at the NASDAQ, waiting for that first trade as we stand here watching that $38 mark. Of course, maybe we should review some of the history that will be made when that trade opens. You know, $38 a share is where it priced, $16 billion raised before the overall allotment. It is, of course, the third biggest U.S. IPO. Mark Zuckerberg.
An iconic moment. An iconic moment that Visa and Enel never were. Let's be honest about it, the number one and the number two.
And this 28-year-old will be a $19.1 billion
or more,
billionaire.
even
or
at 42
more, exactly.
with his 503 million shares. Well, you can do the math.
Yeah,
That's over $20 billion.
as Carl had mentioned, every dollar above $38 will mean $4 billion extra in the hands of shareholders. That is why we are watching this so
Every
carefully.
$10.
Every $10, excuse me.
Because I was trying to think this morning.
Every $10 is $4 billion.
Well, was it only a year ago? Was it only a year ago that we were wondering whether Facebook would even go public? It was only a year ago, before that private transaction, David, where the whole issue was Facebook even going to go public.
Right. Well, they had access to the capital markets everywhere they needed.
Yep.
They were generating cash, and there was an ability for insiders to sell out given the growth of that second market. All that being said, once they got to at least 500 investors, they were going to be forced by the SEC to make certain disclosures. It didn't make sense. You know, that not to go public, not to mention, it was always going to go public someday. The question was, it was in no hurry.
Yeah.
Right. Kramer, I know you're still on the phone.
Yeah, I'm getting nervous. I think I fear that people are saying, hey, it's not open yet, I can still get in. Let me go play some market orders. The way sophisticated people are taking action right now. Once again, I think there's going to be another moment to be able to buy it. You don't need to freak out. You don't need to be at the opening. Please be tempered.
Be tempered, yeah. And of course, we've learned the lesson. We've seen what happened with the LinkedIn IPO, which doubled on the first day of trading on May 19th. It doubled, and then when the lockup expired 10 days after that, it traded all the way down to 59, which is a low on the stock. It's since recovered, but that just goes to show you that there may be other entry points. There may be other entry points out there once the lockups go. And Gary, is this different though? Because there is the point to be made that this is such a large holding that people will have to hold on in order to just sort of be benchmarked, and it is a core holding as opposed to a lot of the other IPOs that have gone to market.
As you and I know, there's always that fear of not owning something.
Right.
No one will ever come and admit it, but there's also going to be that element of